Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of Smart Talks put on by the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. I'm Elizabeth Smart. I am here with my co-host, Mio Strong, who is our director of our Smart Defense program. And today, wow, today is a huge deal. I mean, today we have an incredible woman with us. I mean, I reviewed her story. I heard her story. Geez, I heard a brief overview of her story recently, and then I read her story again in preparation for this, and just even now I can still feel my body just like going through the waves of emotion, because she is not just a survivor, she's a hero, and she's amazing and incredible. So we are extremely honored to have Cathy Hoffman with us today. Thank you so much, Cathy, for taking time out of your day and joining us.
Absolutely. It's an honor.
And now that I have built you up, I didn't feel I did justice in introducing you, because you are amazing. But can you just begin a little bit with telling us what your childhood was like?
Yes. So I am the middle of 3 adopted siblings. I have an older sister and a younger brother. My parents were not able to have children of their own, and so they felt that God had called them to go the adoption route. And originally they had been looking for children that looked like my mother. My mother is Native American, and my father is, a tall Caucasian German guy. So initially they had, tried to find kids that looked like them. And for whatever reason, each time it fell through. And I think they were only looking for one at a time, one kid, just for starters. And so they ended up, getting a call, and the caseworker said, "Hey, we have 3 kids. Do you want them?" And by this point, I assume the amount of paperwork that they had to do for each adoption attempt, they were just like, "Absolutely, we'll take them. Where do we sign?" And so they took us home. My sister was 9, I was 4, and my brother was 18 months. So they got an entire range of kids to start with, which, most parents are, the first baby, they're like, "Yeah, okay. It's a learning process, right? You get to start at age 0 and then work forward." Well, they had all of us across the board. And my sister and I were still quite aware and had a good memory of the foster homes that we had been in. And there, of course, you have your fantastic foster homes where you've got really, really great people who are doing such an awesome thing for children, and then you have your foster homes that are not. And so we had a fair mix of those. So growing up, the first little bit, it was bliss. I mean, me and my sister were like, "This is heaven. We don't get hand-me-downs anymore. I don't have to fight my sister for a toy." We still did, though. And yeah, exactly. But I think just because of the age we were when we were adopted, as well as, a lot of the trauma that we had already endured before, my parents adopted us, my sister and I never really bonded with our mother. That was something that we struggled with pretty consistently. Eventually, some of the trauma and the issues that we had, it resulted in my sister putting herself back into foster care at the age of 15 voluntarily, because things were not working with our family. It was a really toxic environment for everyone. And so I was the one that was left. And I was the trouble child. I definitely struggled in school, and, I'm a smart kid. Teachers loved me and they hated me. They loved me because I was smart. They loved me because I loved to read, but I had a hard time staying interested because I was 10 steps ahead. I was stealing older grades textbooks and like reading them. Instead of my class's textbooks, because I'd already finished those. So once my sister was out of the picture and I was, the one that was left, I very quickly became the focus of the reason that things weren't working out in my family. And it's not for lack of trying. I mean, no matter what I did, I would get on my knees and I would cry and pray to God, "Please just make me good enough. I just want to be good enough. I just want them to keep me this time." because they would periodically, I think I was maybe 10 the first time they sent me away. And I think I was gone until I was 11 and a half, 12 maybe. And then I was home for a short amount of time. And I call those the honeymoon phases because, I had been programmed, in essence, to be the ideal child. Unfortunately, due to some of the abuse that happened while I was at this boarding school, that only lasted for about 3 months before there was just so much confusion and anger built up inside of me because I didn't understand what had happened to me. And I didn't know to tell anyone either. I just, it's like, what do you say? And when you're sent away to a boarding school because you're kind of a trouble child, anything that you do say, if you do try to say something saying, hey, this is what's happening, there's something not right here, it's kind of just looked at as an attempt to get out of the program, get sent home, get pulled. And so, parents were instructed by the facility at each one I was at not to engage or discuss any of those things because it was, in their words, a manipulation tactic. So, yeah. Yeah. So, and the thing about a lot of these centers that's kind of interesting is they're not required to be licensed.
Wait.
So a lot of,
they're not wait.
Right. So a residential treatment center has to have licensing. A boarding school only has to have accreditation. So if you're registered as a boarding school, all you need to have is accreditation and teachers that have teaching licenses. They've received their degrees. And so a lot of these facilities get away with starving children, beating children, anything you can imagine, because the government is not involved. It's not regulated.
And I mean, they're still up and running. Like,
absolutely. So each boarding school that I was sent to has now been shut down because of either abuse allegations that came forward, whistleblowers. There's. Oh, but it took some time. The first home that I was sent to, before I had even been sent there, I believe it was in 2002, the headmaster had savagely beaten a boy and restrained him to the point that his arms popped out of his sockets. He was showing pornographic material to the children, and he continued.
Oh, right there.
Yeah. But no one knows about it. I mean, parents were told, you are not going to talk to your child for at least 3 months. And even then, once that 3 months has passed, they need to be a certain level. So you can talk to them. You can only talk to them once a month. And I think it was maybe a 15-minute phone call. So the person that ran the first boarding school that I was sent to had already had abuse allegations. He had already been convicted. And he was not ordered to stay away from children. He was just ordered not to be alone with them. And he continued to work at the facility. Technically, he had stepped down, I believe, as director, but his wife took his place. And so he was there. There was never any separation. He never actually really stuck to the rules or was truly pursued in what I believe is the fullest extent that he should have been.
Wow.
Yeah.
Of these schools.
Right. So the first one I went to was a facility called Majestic Ranch Academy, and they're part of the WASP accreditation system or program. The second one that I was sent to, I believe, was just an outpatient, a local one. Actually, no, but I mean, the first time I ever was sent to a facility, it was actually at Primary Children's in Salt Lake City. And I stayed there for several weeks. I think I was 8 or 9, I think. And by that time, my goodness, I had probably been on half of the medications that they normally put adults on. I remember having to have my blood tested frequently to make sure that my organs were still functional because they were dangerous medications and they were given to someone who weighed like 40 pounds. So Primary Children's, when I was very young, and Majestic Ranch a little later. I came home for a short amount of time, attended a normal elementary school. And again, the first couple of months when I was home were great. And then I kind of slowly just fell apart. And by that time, my parents, I don't remember how old I was, but they sent me to the next one. And that one was Integrity House. And that one has now also been shut down and purchased by another couple who's, redone the whole thing. And apparently they're running things up to standards. But again, that home was shut down as well. And you can look all over the internet. Daniel Taylor was accused of sexually assaulting multiple young women and was never truly prosecuted because, again, the nature of the trauma that these girls endured was enough for a judge to say that they're not competent.
Oh. So, right.
So we walked. And, it's been a struggle kind of watching, because I'm still in touch with almost every single one of those girls. We bonded, we formed a sisterhood. We were in the trenches together. And so I'm still in contact with a lot of them, and watching some of us, not all of us, the majority of us have been able to really push past a lot of the trauma and be fully functional and very successful adults. But there were some that, we lost. We lost a lot, 3 or 4 girls to suicide, and, yeah. So
also differently.
Yeah. It's great though. I never really got the family that I wanted growing up. I kind of had it like dangled on a string, and it was like, you could have that, because I saw it happen with my little brother. They really bonded with him, and they had have an incredible relationship with him. And so seeing that, and it just, oh man, I just wanted it so bad, but it just always seemed to be out of reach, or I would have it for a little while and then things would fall apart again. So, but these women, I mean, they're the family that I've made for myself. And that's the awesome thing about connecting with other survivors, is you don't know them, but that's family, as far as I'm concerned. And so I have a family, not the one I wanted, but the one I've created.
And sometimes that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And so you went through multiple boarding schools, but none of it really ended up making it permanently beber. It kind of came to a crisis.
Right. And there were some incredible coping skills that I learned. There was a lot of good that was mixed in with the terrible and the abuse. And so I did learn things that I, to this day use, but it didn't, it didn't take in quite the way that my family had wanted it to. I've always been a very strong-minded, very opinionated, educated woman. And I think, sometimes parents, they can appreciate that from their children in very, very small doses. It is easier to have a child that says, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, doesn't ask any questions, doesn't cause trouble. But that's not the majority of children, especially with social media now. And so, the child that they wanted, which was the yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, church every Sunday and just really, really well behaved, it was a rare appearance. And again, eventually I would kind of revert back to that struggle, that kind of limbo.
So what happened after none of these things really seemed to change?
Right. So I knew that even though I wanted that relationship with my family, and even though I, again, tried really, really hard, it just wasn't working. And so it was easier for my parents to put me down in the basement and lock the door. And my conversation with them basically just became passing notes under the door. I lost the privilege to call them mom and dad. I had to call them Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman for a period of time. And it was very difficult.
And what age is this? Is this high school?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I continued to live in the basement. I had a little job at a smoothie shop, and I was allowed to go out only to go to work. I wasn't attending any school because of the behavioral issues that I had previously, I believe in elementary school, or maybe junior high is the last time I actually went to a public school. And that's kind of where my education stopped. I think I was in maybe 8th grade, 9th grade. And I was pulled from school, and I was never brought back. And there was an opportunity to, look at these books, and, I think she tried homeschooling me for a little bit, but homeschooling, you still need to be qualified to homeschool. You still need to have all the materials. You still need to have the things that are going to allow your child to actually graduate high school with an accreditation, instead of just saying, okay, look, I did it. I'm saying I did it, but I don't have anything to prove that. So I wasn't going to school. I was just working and living in the basement, and my meals would be put on the top of the stairs on a tray. If I needed anything, I was to write a note asking and then they would write back or respond. And so I became very, very much so separated from the people that lived upstairs, which at that point was my mother and my father and my brother. And I had very little contact with them.
And then talk about them right now. I mean, you're still calling mother and father. Yeah. And there's kind of a part of me that's saying, wait a second, no. Yeah. Mothers and fathers, people who claim that title of mother and father, they do not do that to them. Right. And so part of surprised. I mean, that you still,
and I guess to some degree, I don't necessarily fault them for it. It was hurtful. It was incredibly hurtful, but there was so much tension and toxicity coming from both sides that probably would have been better than trying to engage with each other, just because of how quickly things would go from 0 to 60. And I don't fault them. I understand not all parents are equipped to handle a child that has behavioral issues, that deeply struggles, that has been abused, let alone dealing with a child that's been abused and you don't know that they've been abused. You don't actually know any of that. And so you just have this incredible rage-filled little girl and you don't know what to do with her. So you send her away and you send her to therapy and you try all of these things that are supposed to work, that people tell you are supposed to work. And then when they don't work and you still have an angry, just hurt child, and, to some degree, that was it. It was easier to stick me in a basement and not worry about me, other than like food and living supplies, than it was to deal with who I was at that time. But yeah, I do still call them mom and dad. They're my parents, no matter what. They're the only parents I've really ever known. And even though we've gone through some really difficult things together, and we have some very serious differences in opinions on certain things, they're my parents. So,
I mean,
yeah,
part of that situation, and I certainly don't understand what that was like. I guess the parent in me, because I have 3 little kids now,
right,
hurts for you.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting. I mean, growing up, it was never a secret that we were adopted. We were all very aware. We do not look like my mother at all. She's short and she's got, brown skin. And so I'm like, I'm almost so white that I'm invisible. If you turn the flash on a camera, I'm gone. All you see is hair. So we looked nothing like her. We knew we were adopted. And again, I think it was just not bonding. We didn't bond, and that's just how it was. But yeah, I mean, there were times where I looked, back at things that happened where I would see my friends getting to have sleepovers. And so I'd run up to my mom, and I remember getting asked over to a sleepover with a girl that I went to Sunday school with, and we were just, we were tight. We were best friends right away. She had awesome curly hair, and I was like, I like your hair. And she's like, I like your face. And, we ran around Sunday. We owned the church. We just ran around all the time. And so she invited me over for a sleepover. And, her mom's on the phone with my mom, and Kaylee and I are in the other room, like picking up the phone, trying not to breathe so we can hear what the answer would be. And my mom came back and said, no, she's on all of these medications, and I just, no. And that was kind of the excuse. No, you're on these medications, or you did something wrong last week, or you did something wrong 5 minutes ago. And so I had almost as much isolation from people my own age as I did from my own family. So I had my friends were books. I was just anything I could get my hands on, I would just read, and that was my escape. And those were my friends, all the characters in books.
Wow. But even the separation that you dealt with of you living in the basement and your parents and family living upstairs, I mean, that didn't even last forever.
No, it didn't. I knew that things were worse, and that just me existing in that home at that point in time was unwelcome. I was not wanted, and that was very, very clear. Justifications aside. And so I woke up one morning and I was told to pack a suitcase, and they drove me to St. Anne's homeless shelter in Ogden. Not a very good part of Ogden, kind of dangerous, and left me outside and said, there's no reason to ever contact us again. And that was that. And so I sat there, and I knew what was going to happen if I went inside. I would either be taken advantage of by someone who was older, or just something would happen. I didn't want to go back to foster care or it just didn't, I knew what was waiting for me inside if I went in and told them who I was. And so I didn't. I got very lucky. And there was, because I remember I sat kind of behind I walked a distance up the road, and I saw like this little bush, and I was like, I'm gonna hide behind there. I don't know where, I'm familiar with the area. I know it's dangerous, and I don't want to be seen. And so I took my little pink suitcase and my sweater, and I tucked myself away behind this bush, and that was that. And that continued. I was either, I at a motel for a night that didn't check IDs, or I was sleeping on a park bench, or there was a period of time where a Hispanic family actually drove by, and they're like, you don't belong here. We can tell that you don't belong here. You're young, you're single, you're a female, and you have a pink suitcase. You just look lost. And so, I sat with them and kind of told them what had happened, and they were incredible, and let me stay with them for a little bit, and actually attended a Hispanic church and sang on their worship team for a while, learned Spanish to do that. Kind of useless now. I mean, I can sing a bunch of worship songs, and I can, understand bits and pieces, but for the most part, I don't fully speak it anymore. And that continued. And so it was, again, on and off. It was like wherever I could find a place. Sometimes it was park benches. Sometimes it was at someone's house. And there was a point where I got a job. I had a friend who was an immigrant who didn't have papers or anything like that. And she told me, look, go here. They don't check. They just pay you. They just need workers. It was manufacturing. And so I got a job there, and I worked like 12-hour shifts, and I would go out behind the building, because it was in the business depot, and it was still fairly empty. That was one of the buildings in the back. And so I would sleep behind the building, and then I would make sure that I would wake up 20 minutes before I was supposed to start, so I could go in and wash, and so no one would know, because I didn't want anyone to know that I was homeless, because it's just, I didn't want anyone to know. I was ashamed. And so I did that for a while. Eventually I saved up enough to get my own apartment, and I did, and it was awesome. I had a cute little 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. I had left the manufacturing job and started with another company, and I was really good at it. And so I moved up the ranks fairly quickly, and was pretty successful in a short amount of time. And so everything was amazing. I was like, I have a job that I love. I have a cute little 2-bedroom apartment. I was just, things were good. I had friends, all of these things that I thought I would never be able to have because of the things that were told to me when I was a child. Not necessarily from my parents, but these facilities. They told me that I would never be successful in the real world if I didn't stick to their program. And so I was under the impressions that I was never going to amount to anything. And so here I am, and I'm accomplishing these things, and I'm being successful. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So I met my roommate at work. She was in the process of almost being evicted. She had black mold in her apartment, and we were very close in age. I think she was maybe a little older than I was by a couple of months. And so I was like, no, there's no way that any of my friends are going to have to go through what I went through. I don't care what I have to do. So I told her, I was like, look, move in with me. You don't have to pay rent until you get caught up. And then when you get caught up, you can we'll split the rent. We'll make it work. And so, for 3 months, she lived with me and didn't pay rent. And I took care of everything, and I gave her a chance to get caught up. And it was nice. I mean, it was nice living with another woman. First of all, I wasn't the only one cooking anymore. But, just the things you get to do when you have a female roommate. And it's like, it's nice. And so we were great. Eventually she started paying rent, and everything was great. And by this time, I had all of these great things, right? I had the job, I had the friends, I had the apartment. And so I had all of these things, and I'm like, wow, I really miss going to church. Because I did. I mean, I was raised in a non-denominational Christian devout household. My parents, in hand with some other people, when I was a child, we did a little bit of church shopping and never really found one that was a really good fit. And so they just decided, hey, let's start our own. And so we started in a backyard with a couple of families, and in a matter of years, we'd blown up. We moved first to a gymnasium, and then to a playhouse, and then broke ground on our first building. And so I had been an active part of that every time I was home. I grew up, I was the first Sunday school class for my church, and I missed it. I missed that sense of community and that sense of family. And I still held onto all of my beliefs and my morals this entire time. Just because I wasn't around my family didn't mean that I still didn't, actively pursue my faith. And that was a difference between my roommate and I. And I was Christian and she wasn't, and I was okay with that. It's my job to love people no matter what. And so I was happy to do that. And, I think because I wasn't in her face and pushy and like, you need to do this, you need to do this, this is wrong, this is wrong. She was like, okay, yeah, I'll go to church with you. It sounds fun. And, I was like, you can wear sweatpants and we have coffee and a rock band. And so she's like, okay, all right, this doesn't sound too bad. And so she went back with me. And this is the first time that I had stepped foot in that building in years. And I purposely went to a different service than I knew my parents would be at, because usually my dad always likes to go to the early service so he could come home, go to Costco, you know, have the whole day left over. And so I went to a later service. I think I went to a 10:30 service. And it just so happens that they were at the same service. And I hadn't seen them in years at this point. It had been a while. And I didn't realize that they were there in the sanctuary with me. I was sitting across the room. And the service ends and I walk out, and I'm kind of standing there with my roommate, like, how was it? Did you like it? Do you hate it? Tell me your thoughts. And then I turn and I see my mom, and she's walking towards me, and she didn't say anything. She just grabbed me and hugged me really hard. And we both kind of lost it for a second. And she had something done to her tear ducts, and so she's like, she constantly looks like she's crying because, you know, she's always producing tears. And so she's like, I'm not crying. These are just, I had a surgery on my tear ducts, and this is what's happening. And I was like, all right. I was just happy that she was talking to me, and that she was happy that I was there, and she was hugging me, because I hadn't been hugged in a really long time by my mom. And so we kind of chatted for a little bit, and I introduced my roommate, and they invited me to breakfast, and told my roommate that, you know, they dropped me off because we took the same car there. And so I went out to breakfast, and this whole time we're driving in my dad's car. I think he had a Murano at the time. And I was like, wow, this car smells so good. Smells like new car. And he's like, yeah, it does this and this and this. And, you know, talking to me about the car, and my mom's talking to me about, you know, things that had happened and things that I missed. And we get to Cracker Barrel, and we sit down and we eat, and, you know, I tell them what's going on in my life and the job and the friends and the apartment. And, you know, we had kind of a heart to heart and really reconnected for the first time in a long time, where it was really mutual on both sides. There was hope there, you know, that things could be restored. And it was great. I mean, again, I had everything. I, you know, was going to church with them every Sunday, and my mom would invite me and my roommate over for dinner. And, you know, the mom thing you do when you have kids that are out of the house, and you're like, how much food is actually in your, and so she sent us home with groceries, and just, you know, it was like, oh, this is what it's like to have a mom. This is what it's like to have a family. And I really enjoyed it. It was incredible. And it was stable for a surprising amount of time. You know, usually I was, again, 2 to 3 months, and that's it. But this lasted. And, you know, every time I would go there, I would make sure I looked professional and polished, and I wanted them to look at me like I was accomplished. You know, look at the things I've done. Look, you know, aren't you proud of me? And again, it kind of became clear, you know, my entire life I had quite strict parents, and even as an adult, my parents, you know, still had rules, and you play by those rules or you're gone. And I was okay with that. I was like, I'll play by your rules. I'll do whatever you want. I'm just happy to be here. And so, you know, I had the job, I had the family back, I had friends, I had a cute little apartment. Everything was great. And I was like, well, maybe I'll try a little bit of dating. You know, I had never been kissed. I was a virgin. Boys still scared me. I was like, gross, you boys, like, why? What's the point, right? And so I went on a couple of dates, and I was just like, I don't get it. Why do people do this? And so I deleted the app. And it was actually an app that my roommate had recommended to me. And she's like, it's a great app, plenty of fish. It's awesome. You know, I meet guys there all the time. And she would come home and she would tell me about these like dates that she'd been on. And some of them she was like, oh my God, it was amazing. You know, it was a candlelight dinner and there was pizza or whatever. And some of them were just really bad, you know, like stereotypical bad dates, right? And so she,
what was I thinking? Why did I say yes to that?
I don't know, typical bad date that you've been on, maybe. So your subconscious is like, wait a second, I identify with that. Yeah, so I deleted the app, and I was like, you know what? God's got a guy for me somewhere. When the time is right, it'll happen. And so she continued to use the app quite frequently. And she came home one day and she was just floored. She was so excited. She had met someone and she'd invited him over for dinner. And she came home with a bunch of Olive Garden bags. And she's like, you can't tell. These are homemade. I'm going to pass them off as mine. This is my homemade fettuccine that my grandma passed down generations ago. And so I'm like, all right, you do you. I've done that at Thanksgiving with pies before. I understand. So I was like, I won't say anything. And so she's just so excited and just going on. And she's rushing through the house, stuffing things in drawers and trying the panic clean that you do when people are coming to your house and you're like, I'm not ready for this. And as she's putting the final touches on her makeup, I remember she was like, she couldn't get her eyeliner quite right. And she'd rubbed it off like 6 or 7 times. And she's like, I'm just going to go with one eye. And so right as she's like fixing her eyeliner, the doorbell rings. And so I look at her and I'm like, is he here? Is he early? I mean, he was 25 minutes early. And so she opened the door and introduced him. I heard him before I saw him, because I was in the kitchen and there was a wall that, blocked the view to the kitchen. And so I heard him before I saw it. And the first thing I noticed was the accent. He had this really just, oh my gosh. For anyone who's a Jane Austen fan or who has watched Pride and Prejudice, you know what I'm talking about. The British accent, the classy, posh. It just makes you 10 times cooler for some reason to us.
Do I need to say more?
Exactly. That's the first thing I noticed was his voice. And I was, they walked around the corner and I was surprised because the voice did not match the person. He was clearly early to mid 40s, probably 5'11" or so, very well dressed. But you could tell, he lived a little. There was a little bit of belly there and, behind the well-tailored jacket. And he was just so charming. I mean, he was apologetic and he's like, I brought wine. I'm so sorry I showed up early. I hope I'm not intruding. And, he was just so charming, incredibly charming. And so I was like, oh no, it's fine. I'm just going to leave. I'm, and me thinking like, oh, they'll be so happy. They're going to have the place to themselves, without like a third wheel. And I was kind of surprised, because he insisted that I stay. He's like, no, oh, absolutely no, you should stay. I mean, there's so much food and I brought this wine and he insisted that I stay. And I didn't know how to politely extract myself from that, because at that point I was, and to some degree still am, a pushover. I didn't want to make someone else uncomfortable in my own home. And so I stayed. And, he talked with my roommate and they flirted back and forth and she got progressively more and more intoxicated. I think we went to the living room just to chat and she ended up falling asleep. And so I am elbowing her, not lightly either. Like I have some sharp elbows and I'm like, wake up, do not do this to me. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not here for this. I was going to go have tacos. So, and so she doesn't wake up. And she started snoring a little intermittently. And so, we tried to play it off and I laughed and made excuses. And I was like, oh no, she had a really long night at work. I'm so sorry. And he continued to talk to me. I expected him to kind of show himself out and leave when she fell asleep, but that didn't happen. So he continued to talk to me and I didn't know what to say because I still did not handle myself well around men at all, especially not ones that were significantly older than me, clearly like worldly, and I just didn't know how to engage. And so he had showed us pictures of his children, and I asked, "How old is your son?" And he looked at me for a second, and I could feel a shift take place immediately. And he said, "He's the same age as your nephew. Hayden, right?" Just like that.
Oh my gosh.
And the hair on the back of my neck stood up for a second. And I was like, oh, well, and I made an excuse. I was like, no, well, my roommate must have said something about my family and my nephews. And, she probably just brought it up in conversation. And then He's like, the one that lives in Eden? The one that lives in Eden? And I was like, there's no way he could know that because my roommate didn't even know that. And he proceeded to tell me where my family lived, what my dad did for work, what license plates they had, the cars they drove. He had information that he should never have been able to get. And I don't know how he got it. I don't. I still don't. I don't know if it was.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I froze completely. And it was like I couldn't move. Like I was.
In that moment, did you realize that his interest clearly had been you and not your roommate?
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't know if he just used her as a way to get to me or if he had done research on both of us and, he decided that I was the better fit for what he was looking for. We did look quite a bit different. She and I were both very, very tall. At the time she was, quite overweight and, I wasn't. And so I may be thinking that I would have been more valuable because of my appearance. So how he decided on me instead of her or, I don't know. But he knew things. I mean, he knew so much. And I was sitting there frozen and I couldn't move and I couldn't breathe. And my mouth was kind of just hanging open like, what do I do? And the only thing that I could think about was the family that I had just gotten back. This was the best time in my life. I had my family and they wanted me around. They were inviting me to go over for dinner every night and, and my nephew, oh my God, I love him to death. I would do anything for that kid. We don't talk a lot, unfortunately now, just because of some circumstances, but it was my fault. All I knew was that they were in trouble, they were in danger, and it was my fault. And I was young. Oh my God, I was so young. I mean, I was young in age, but I was also very, very much so young mentally, I think. And I didn't know what to do. I was so naive. I was like, now I would have just been like, all right, cool. I have 911 on speed dial. You want to fight? I'm very, very confident and very, I don't want them to push me around anymore.
You're young mentally or not. I mean,
yeah,
you shouldn't have had to ever be in that situation.
Right.
Just
Right.
No way. Like, you're
right. And it was something so innocent. I mean, it took him probably 10 seconds maybe to send that first message. That first message changed the course of my life entirely. And there's so many people that use it. There's Tinder, there's Plenty of Fish, there's Match, there's all of these dating apps and social media outlets that predators use to prey on women and men even. And I mean, looking back, it was very clear that he'd done it before because of the amount of confidence that he had. He clearly pegged me as someone who was not going to fight back or was going to be easily coerced. And he took advantage of that. And so he looked at me and he threatened my family again. And then he said, I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave. And you're going to pack a bag and you're going to be ready tomorrow. And I'm going to come and get you. You're going to tell your friends and family that you're going to visit someone in Kentucky. And I did. And you're going to give me all of your passwords for your social media, for your phone, everything. So he had been posting as me on my Facebook. And at a point, he even made me call my parents, talk to my mom. And he was standing there the whole time, watching me with a knife. And my mom's a smart lady. Not much gets past her. And so by this point, after so many delayed excuses, like why couldn't I come home? And I was staying with my friend in Kentucky. She's like, well, where are you staying? And I panicked, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he really, really quickly Googled a random address in Kentucky and gave it and told me, you tell her this is where you are. So she looked it up. She was like, oh, that's interesting. She looked up the property records. She could tell that the name that I had given her, that person didn't live there. And so that really quickly ended the phone call. But the way that I got there, which again, this is for people that work in airports, that work in any type of security at all. This is something that I just wish people would. I wish people would ask the hard questions. I know that people, they see something and they're like, that's a little weird, but they don't want to make someone uncomfortable, so they don't say anything. And so that morning, I hugged my roommate goodbye, and I told her I'd bring her back a souvenir from Kentucky. And she's like, okay, thanks. And, just text me and call me, make sure that you're, I want to hear from you. And she left for work, and probably within 5 minutes of her leaving from work, he showed up at my door, let himself in, and again, showed me my family, the house that they lived, pictures, and he explained what would happen if I didn't do what he said. And I was just numb at this point. I was on autopilot, because that's where I had to go to get through it. So we drive to the airport, and he gets something out of the back of the car. And I kind of saw him like struggling with it for a second, and I didn't realize what it was. And then he opened it up, and I thought it was a wheelchair. I'm like, why do we need that?
At this point in time, did you have anything going through your mind? I mean, did you know what he was doing or where you were going? Or, I mean, did you have any inkling of what was going on?
I knew it wasn't going to be good. But I was hoping that it wouldn't be, I was just hoping that it wouldn't be as bad as what maybe it could be. So yeah, I mean, I had a ballpark idea of what was happening to me, but I didn't know if he just wanted me and, was going to take me back to his house, and I didn't know. So, and he didn't tell me. Wasn't exactly in the business of sharing information with his abductee.
I mean, he didn't talk to you as he drove you to the airport, or?
He was very brief. Anytime he would talk to me, it was very clear that he was not going to share anything about himself yet at that point. But he kept talking about his kids and his life and places that he'd been and experiences and meals that he'd had. He was having a normal conversation with me.
Okay.
Nothing was happening. So he gets this wheelchair out, and I'm kind of looking on the passenger window, looking at it. I'm confused. And he gets back in the car, and before I had time to react, he stabbed me with something. It was just a really quick sting, and I looked over, and there was a needle sticking out of my arm. And I would say within 5 minutes, I couldn't talk, I couldn't move. I was still very much alert, but it was like I was not myself. I couldn't recognize myself as me anymore. And I later found out that it was a cocktail of dissociative drugs, one being ketamine, which is also used as a tranquilizer for horses.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And the other was GHB, which, is a date rape drug.
Yeah.
So the dose that he gave me was enough to immobilize me and kind of, keep me calm while he got me through security. No one really stopped to ask questions because he would volunteer information. he would talk about how I was his autistic niece and we were going on a vacation, or his daughter even. Anyone that he would come across that he thought maybe could look at us and say something's not right, he would volunteer this information and put people at ease before they had even had the chance to ask what was going on. And he was very smooth. Again, very charming. Very, very charming.
And of course you didn't respond because
no,
you were on a horse tranquilizer.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was intense. A little hallucinogenic. In larger doses it becomes a psychedelic hallucinogenic. And in smaller doses, it, for some reason, it elevates your heart rate. So in small doses, it elevates your heart rate. In large doses, it's a central nervous system depressant. So it's got some kind of interesting uses when it's used properly.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm really not sure that there's a proper use for it, except maybe on horses.
Yes. Well, it's kind of interesting. Ketamine has now, the FDA has now moved forward, and it's being used to treat drug-resistant depression in very, very, very minor doses. The dose that I got was nothing close to the actual medicinal usage that is being implemented right now. So he was able to get me through an entire airport full of people, onto an airplane, off the airplane, through another airport, where he wheeled us to the handicap bathroom and gave me another dose. This one bigger, significantly larger, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up nude in a dog cage and I couldn't move. Still, I was having a really hard time. Like I knew that my body was, okay, like I could feel it, but I couldn't move very much. And so I just pushed myself to the back of this cage, and I was ready to start screaming, and I wasn't the only one that was there. When I kind of got my bearings and I looked around, it was a warehouse. It was pretty grimy, pretty filthy. There was someone next to me. There were other people there. So when I opened my mouth to scream, Sammy shoved her hand through the metal and covered my mouth. She's like, "Don't scream, please don't scream. It's just gonna make them angry." And so by then I had kind of caught my breath a little, and I could talk. I was still really having a hard time. My tongue was just so heavy and my mouth was so dry. And so I'm trying to get these questions out as fast as I can. Where am I? Why am I here? What's happening? And she was the first person to tell me what was happening.
And she was in a cage as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she was definitely a little bit older than me, as we got to know each other in the time that I was there. She had a little girl she talked about all the time. And we would talk about, the foods that we were going to eat once we were free constantly. Like, we were always talking about food. Like, pizza, it's going to be so good. And, we would just constantly talk about what would happen when we got out. And, but she was the first person that was there to comfort me and to explain what was going on and to hold my hand. And we did. I mean, I think there was maybe...
What did she tell you? I mean, what did she say was going on?
So I asked what was going on, and she kind of looked at me for a second, and I could tell that she was surprised that I didn't know already. And she's like, "You're here for sex. You're here because people are going to buy you." And I didn't understand. I said, "What do you mean people are going to buy me?" And she's like, "There are people that will pay money to have a certain amount of time with you. They take us to these places, parties, houses, golf clubs, and they would sell us to whoever wanted to buy us." And so she told me, and I just, my heart sunk, because I was like, no one's going to look for me. They think I'm fine. there's no one that's going to ask any questions. I wasn't necessarily close enough with my family that they really would have looked for me very hard. They would have kind of just chalked my disappearance up to, oh, she's off, having mental health issues or something. And so I knew that there was a very real possibility, given that I had already told them that I was going on this trip. My social media accounts had all been, opened and were being used by this person pretending to be me. I knew that there was a very strong chance that I would not get out of there. And she did too. I don't know what happened to her.
So you've never been able to reconnect with her?
There was an incident before I was taken by the man who procured me. And I had to clean up a lot of blood. She wasn't there anymore.
Oh my God.
So I had been there asleep for a portion of it because I had been drugged again. And I distinctly remember hearing noise. And there's when someone's being kicked or hit, there's a very distinctive noise that happens. So I remember waking up to that and then looking over, and there was just blood everywhere. And they took me out of the cage and told me to clean it up. And I never saw her again.
Oh my God.
So I don't know what happened to her, but I can guess. And but she was just the best. She was so full of life and so passionate and feisty. Oh my God. It was great. I mean, she was wonderful and she got me through it. She's the only reason that I'm probably still here, because she told me what I would need to do to make it through however long I was there. She told me what to do and how to speak, when I should and when I shouldn't make any eye contact with these people. She kind of showed me the ropes, as it were. And so I believe it was 2 or 3 days after I got there, I was sold for the first time. I was a virgin. I had never been kissed. And I was sold to a 70-year-old man, $4,000. And I know it was $4,000 because I had to count the bills. And then I was taken to the bed. And for the next couple of hours, I was assaulted over and over again. And you definitely disassociate. You go somewhere in your head and you try to just pretend it's not happening to you. And I did. And I remember when he was finished and I was taken back to the warehouse, put me back in the cage, didn't say a word. My clothes were taken again. Every time we would go out, we would be bathed, we would dress, and it was very odd because the man who procured me was very personal when it came to the way that I dressed and the way that my makeup was done. I was 19 and I was a little heavy-handed, I'm not gonna lie, with makeup, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I had a ballpark idea, but if I would apply makeup too heavily, he would immediately just freak out. And I realized it was because they wanted me to look as young as possible. And so he would apply my makeup. He put just the tiniest bit of blush on my cheeks, and sometimes he would even apply lip gloss or lip color himself.
Oh my God.
Every time that we were taken to one of these places, I was very surprised because I had this idea in my head that, when these things happen, it's like the seediest part of the world, right? It's the flea bag motels, and that's not the case. These people that purchased us, that bought us, were very well dressed. They were well spoken. They were affluent people. And their homes were beautiful. I mean, I was taken to homes and a country club one time, or hotels, and we were made to match the level of society that we would be in. So we all were wearing, I think that's the only time in my life I've ever worn Chanel or anything beautiful like that. That's very high quality, very expensive. We were made to match our surroundings. People that bought us wanted us to look a certain way. And yeah, I was so surprised by that, because I thought I had this idea of what, trafficking was generally, and the type of people that I thought looked like the type of people to do that type of thing. And that was very, very quickly, I reevaluated that notion. And yeah, so I, quite a few more times, probably, I think I lost track after 7. There was an incident where one of the people who watched us hit me in the face really, really hard. And the person that procured me always instructed these people not to leave any marks. Don't leave bruises, you don't leave marks, and you don't cut them, because people don't want to buy that. They want people that are fresh and young and unbruised. So he hit me in the face because I have a little bit of a temper. Again, strong opinionated woman. And no, not at all. And I had said something, and it just, so he opened the cage, yanked me out, smacked me around pretty hard, and split my lip. And the person who had procured me was furious. I watched him beat that man nearly to death with the help of, 2 other people. And I didn't see him again. He wasn't dead when he left. He was very much alive. But I didn't see him again. And after this particular incident, for whatever reason, even when he wasn't using me physically, at this point, he himself had not yet assaulted me. Again, that was just, I was there for other purposes. But he had taken a very keen interest in me as just a human being, and he would try to get me to talk to him and have these conversations, and I did. I did engage with him, and because I knew that if I didn't, it could be worse. Something might happen. I might piss him off, or And so he had always taken an interest in me. Again, going even so far as to apply my makeup personal to himself. So after this happened, and I had a split lip, and obviously I wasn't going to be good for for work anytime soon until that healed. He took me with him, and I was dosed again, and he took me to, I don't know if it was his home or if it was just a property that the people that he worked with owned. And he locked me in the basement, and I would spend my time when he wasn't there either shackled to the bed, or he had a hook that when my hands were bound, he would on the ceiling, and he would kind of string me up. And I remember that my feet, I had to balance on my tippy toes, because if I didn't, my arm, like my shoulder sockets would just, they were on fire. Or I wouldn't be able to breathe very well. So I was either locked up when he wasn't there, either to the bed or to the rafter, and he would come in, and every time he came in, I would know, because I would hear a garage door open, that I would hear an alarm. There was an alarm system. I would hear him storm the alarm, and then he'd come down the stairs, and it would begin. And it was just this very bizarre mixture of like normal person conversations, travel, food, books, literature. He was very, very well educated, very smart. And so we would talk, and then he would tell me things. He would tell me things about his mother and how much he hated her and how cold she was. He always used that term when he was talking about women that were of significance in his life. These women were cold and unyielding and vicious, and he had so much hatred for them. And I knew that I needed to be the exact opposite of what he thought those women were if I was going to make it out. Because if he thought that I was any of those things for a second, I was done. I wasn't interesting anymore. So, you know, progressively we would talk and I would engage, and every time he would assault me, instead of turning my eyes away or turning my head away, I made sure that I looked at him. And I tried to convey as much warmth and affection and love that I could possibly muster, because I needed him. I needed him to see me as a human.